I'm going to do the very initial setup on this Lux Flight Controller, and that's going to involve some soldering. I'm going to solder on the pins. If you're not going to use the pins, if you're going to do a direct solder installation, then of course you won't be doing that. And I'm also going to show you how to solder these jumpers. Some people have said that the jumpers are very small and hard to solder, and they are very small. But it's not too hard because you don't have to be super precise. You just got to get the solder on there and get it to bridge the pins. If you're having trouble soldering, definitely look to your equipment. You need to have a clean soldering iron tip. If your tip is all oxidized, you're not going to get good heat transfer. A lot of times people who are having trouble soldering are just trying to work with bad equipment, and unlike some disciplines, there's where skill can make up for bad equipment. If you have a dirty soldering iron tip or anything like that, you're just not going to get it done. It's just not going to work. So definitely it's a little hard because of the focus, but as you can see there, the tip is clean. There's not any black oxidation on it, and if in fact I go and swipe it, it'll go shiny again. Good shiny tip, that's what you want. So then I think let's see, yeah, you're going to be able to see. So I'm going to bridge for 5 volts, and I'm going to bridge for the serial receiver. That's what I'm going to be using. And I'm just going to touch the pad and then just dab a little solder in, and you can see there I've got just the tiniest little ball of solder on the 5-volt pad, and it's just sitting there. And in fact, that may be enough that I can just bridge it over to the 5-volt pad, just like that. So one of the principles that's in play when you're soldering, this is also true if you're ever welding. I learned it welding and realized later that it applied to soldering, is that the metal is going to flow where the heat is. So if you've got a little solder ball standing up on the pad and you want to sort of bridge over, just heat the pad where you want it to go, and it'll melt and it'll flow towards the heat. If you've got solder and it's balling up and it's not flowing, probably you're too cold, and that's why it's happening. So there you go. That was just that simple. Just a little dab of solder to get it on the pad, and then just sort of, that's actually more solder than I strictly needed, but that's just all there is to it. I'm going to do the same thing now for the Serial RX. Again, just a little ball of solder there, and then I'm just going to move it over, and I kind of don't like, there's a little too much there. It's a little cold and didn't flow, and there's a little pointy tip there. I kind of don't like that. I don't like my joints to look like that. I'm going to see if I can just clean that up a little. It's not the end of the world. It'll be alright. Ideally, you want a smooth, shiny ball. That's what you're going for. Now, for installing the pins, and I'm going to install the pins for this one, here's how I like to do it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get just a little bit of solder on one of the pads. I don't want to get so much solder that it stands up and makes a hump or a hill and means I can't slide the pin on. I just want the tiniest bit on there. Just a little bit. That's maybe even a little more than I needed, but we'll see how it goes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pins and I'm going to slide them on. And they're kind of, oh, that actually is perfect. So the friction from the solder I put on there is just enough that it's holding them in place. They're straight, they're just how I want them to be. I'm going to use that friction from that little blob of solder I put on there to hold them in place. And then I'm going to come back with the iron, and I'm just going to heat that one pin, and that's going to flow that solder and hold the whole header in place. Okay, so it moved a little. That's okay. I'm going to just heat it, and I'm going to move it back where it needs to go. There we go. Perfect. That's pretty good. So you don't want to overheat that because this little plastic header will melt and your pins will all start going all over the place. And also when you're doing this, be careful not to touch the pin that you're soldering or you will burn your hand. But you can put your finger here at one end while you're soldering the other end, and you can kind of heat it till it loosens up, get it right where you want it, and now that it's right where you want it, it's tacked in place, you can just go back across and get all the others. So I'm not going to make you watch me do that. That's not too hard. That's just soldering 101. But there's a little tip for installing headers like this. You can do this for these edge launch headers, any kind of header that you're installing. Just take one pad, put a tiny bit of solder on it, then heat it, get the header in place, heat it, adjust the header till the header is perfectly straight and right how you want it, and then just solder the whole rest of it, okay? Anyway, there you go. So it's all soldered up, and that's basically it. Then you just connect it up, and I'll do that in a separate video.